this is what to expect, what's coming up with the lightning round. And that is, this is going to be a fast moving session. So fasten your seat belts. There'll be a lot of content. Some of it will be more technical, some of it will be less technical, but it's guaranteed to be exciting. And leading the lightning round and the person that's responsible for putting it all together is Ken Rubin, who's going to be your facilitator. And Ken is the executive director of BPM Plus Health, and he's a tireless builder of communities of practice. He has extensive experience in healthcare IT, interoperability, and the development, use, and application of standards. So without further ado, I'll just pass it over to Ken, and he'll take it from here. Ken, thanks. And Ken, you're on mute.
Thank you. So while it absolutely takes a village, it's a pleasure to be here. But before we get into it, well, the lightning round was originally kind of my idea. Matt Rose did a substantial amount and most of the heavy lifting and pulling it together. So I just wanted to call him out, and we'll be hearing from Matt in a little bit. First, thanks to all of you for making some time to be with us today. I think it was a really good morning. We heard a lot of the context around advanced care planning and e-consent and kind of framed the problem space. This afternoon is a different chapter in that book. So where the morning was kind of focused on the business problem and the challenges and the opportunities that might be out there, this lightning round is really a foray into what's actively happening out there in the community. We've invited a handful of organizations to present on current work that's underway in the community. Some of these are standards bodies, some of these are companies, et cetera. We've asked all the participants involved to not give us product pitches. So this is not a sales cycle. It's really an intent to look under the covers on some of the activities that are underway in this space. What I would like to put out as a challenge to each of you as attendees as we go through the lightning round, and I'll frame up exactly how this is going to work in a second. But I ask you to look beyond the specific items that are being discussed to commonalities. So the reason to do the lightning round, these are quick hit presentations. We're starting with a couple of kind of slightly longer discussions. The first one is kind of a 30-minute talk around some of the standards work in the space and reference implementation into some test bed environments, into kind of 5-minute sessions or vignettes on a whole series of different projects. So really the intent here is to identify commonalities, common themes, interests, et cetera, that we think are crucial as we head toward building a community of practice or a community of interest around this topic of e-consent and advanced care planning. So focus more on the forest than the trees, but hopefully as we see this set of topics in quick succession, we'll start to see some themes emerge, and that's really what I think the lightning round brings to us. I'll just reinforce one of the things that Ed said. We are keenly interested in your thoughts and comments. We'll probably collect those throughout the afternoon, so if we don't get to them in the lightning round, we have a reaction panel following that, and then a kind of game plan for where to go next as a community. And we definitely want your thoughts and ideas as we feed into those sessions. So please do engage. Without further ado, what I'd like to do is pass the baton over to Ben Cushing. Ben is actively involved in the BPM Plus Health community. BPM Plus it's a nonprofit community of interest around workflow and shareable pathways. And Ben leads our process automation and enablement work group along with Ken Allgood, whom I believe we'll also hear from tonight. So without further ado, Ben, the floor is yours.
Oh, great. Can everyone see me okay and see the slides?
Yes.
All right. Hi there. Thanks, Ken, for the introduction. I hope everyone's having a safe and healthy day. I'm Ben Cushing, the co-chair of the Process Automation and Enablement Working Group inside of BPM Plus Health. I also moonlight at the plucky open source software company Red Hat, which is like the most ubiquitous software company in the healthcare markets globally. I'm joined by two of my colleagues from the BPM Plus community. John, would you please introduce yourself?
John Sterbley, CMIO from Trisotech.
And we also have Ken Allgood.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Ken Allgood, co-chair with Ben, to Ken's point, on the BPM Plus Process Automation Working Group and founder and CEO of HealthFlow.
So our session is going to be a little different than what came before. As Ken outlined, a lot of the previous presentations were about defining the challenges and the business use case. Here we're going to talk more about solutions and what's going on inside of our community to try to tackle these very broad issues. More specifically, we're going to introduce the concept of process automation and provide a demo of procedural e-consent and holistic ACP. It's worth noting the process models that we're sharing today were developed and led by care partners. So a lot of the folks you've already heard from today directly influence a lot of the work we've done inside of the community, as well as a number of technologists that have engaged across the landscape of healthcare automation. All right, Ken, why don't you give us a quick rundown of some of the industry terms that we're going to encounter today, and just so people have a bit of a primer on what these mean. You'll learn a whole lot more about them later on, but you're going to start hearing these terms throughout the presentation, and want you to at least have a sense of what we're talking about.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So, as we discussed, our focus is really around implementation, and a big piece of that is modeling out what the organizations actually need to do and putting automation in place to support that. We'll walk through how where there's been improvement, where we see value of that across a wide variety of industries, but specifically in health, we'll touch on some of those as well. First, let's start with the Gartner definition for business process automation. It's really, again, about taking those business models, those models of how we do work, and then placing them on an automation engine. The digital process automation, again, from a Forrester perspective, it's really around taking that and building upon it, specifically focusing on low-code development, letting organizations really start to automate elements within their own operational flow without having to bring in a bunch of outside consultants. Also, on the right-hand side, we'll run through some general modeling terms, and John's going to run through these as he runs through the demo as well. So we wanted to make sure you understood what they mean. So BPMN, if you'll notice, it aligns well with the name of our organization. That's Business Process Modeling Notation. That's an approach that captures processes in an executable business process model. CMMN is a graphical representation for visually expressing a use case. So it's a type of model notation, and that's actually what John's going to be running through during the demo. And DMN is a standard approach for describing and modeling repeatable decisions. So you use these to help guide those process flows that you've modeled out in either CMMN or BPMN.
Thanks, Ken.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I want to point out for any folks who are coming into this sort of for the first time, process automation in healthcare may sound novel, but this transformative methodology is already wildly popular in the spectrum of other industries, such as finance, manufacturing, and supply chain management. These are some examples of those types of use cases where automation has really dominated the field. And really, we view healthcare as the next frontier for this type of work. I did want to ask Ken or John, maybe Ken first, what are some of the barriers of entry that have slowed the adoption in healthcare?
Sure, Ben. So healthcare is different. That's the reason it has its own vertical. You've got a lot of dependencies, a lot of complexity that's actually tied into how each one of these processes interplay with the care for patients. So some of the elements where we've seen automation really get adopted quickly are things around supply chain, some of the stuff you see on the screen in front of you. We're starting to move, and we'll talk about it on the next slide, into areas where we've seen success within healthcare. where we're able to take it away from the direct care for a patient, but rather use it from the supporting perspective. So really kind of shifting it back to the strength of automation, and again, tying it back to repeatable models that can be standardized and reused across an organization.
Another factor is regulatory compliance as guided by the FDA, which gives stipulations for what consists of a medical device. And that poses issues that need to be resolved.
A good point. Thank you, John. Okay, moving forward. Ken, if you could kind of walk us through some of the successes we've already seen in automation inside of healthcare, just as a proof of the pudding that these things are actually happening in real life, and this isn't a pipe dream of the technologists.
No, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, what some of the initial targets, specifically in healthcare, have really been focused on back office automation. So taking those tasks, which are quite often administrative, and taking them out of the hands of the care providers to enable them to really focus on patient care. So one of the initial targets was patient scheduling, being able to streamline that patient appointment setting up and really align it with the diagnosis, location, doctor availability, doing that filtering in advance, and then providing those recommendations then to either the care provider or the care teams. Claims and billing is another one where there's not only just tons of interaction and to be able to get those things rolling forward and be able to get that reimbursement. There's also the problem of occasional human error in the input of the data. So we're seeing a lot of automation there. It also makes it easier for us to connect that reimbursement to core ACO criteria so that we're able to simplify that as well and accelerate that repayment. And as was mentioned earlier today around just the concept of advanced directives, often the data is scattered for the patient. It's in silos all over the place. Another area where we're seeing a lot of opportunity is in the patient data aggregation, being able to really responsively automate that collection and preparation of the patient information, do filtering, do sorting, and really provide the full picture of the patient back to the care providers in the context of care, to include advanced directives. Again, the bottom line, we're leveraging process automation to be able to allow the care teams to really focus on what's important, which is the patient.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. Yeah, I just want to say that what we've sort of looking at that landscape of IT advances through automation, and then thinking about the kind of activity that can be automated inside of the healthcare market at large. There's an idea here that advanced directives, advanced care planning, and e-consent are areas that we're targeting. So for those of you who are looking to adopt process automation inside your enterprise, it's important to recognize there's really 3 stages to actually seeing this through. The first is having a champion within your organization who is willing to embrace change and is empowered to try new things. That's a great place to start, especially if they have one foot in IT and another in clinical operations. Secondly, authoring. You need to use storytelling really to capture the as-is workflow and then expand to include exceptions. The point of care slides from earlier today that Pooja had shared, that's the kind of focus you need. And those advanced directive workflows is an excellent example of a domain level process. During authoring, it's essential to lean into a standard so your processes maintain portability across the IT landscape. So we call those out here, BPMN, CMMN, DMN. This is going to let you operate and not be locked into a single vendor. This is an important distinction when it comes to doing workflow in proprietary systems. And the last step is what we've been talking about, automation. So these models that you create are not static, they're executables, and they can be deployed and can communicate with existing IT systems to orchestrate tasks. I will point out that is distinctly different than FHIR because these processes are alive, listening, and active, but are highly complementary and in a lot of ways dependent on FHIR for data interoperability. Ken, anything to add there?
No, I think you touched on really the core pieces, which is around that standardization and really around the capability and the empowerment of the teams within the organization to start to adopt this, start identifying core processes like we referenced on the previous slide, and really to start putting this into play within the organization.
All right, one of the interesting things to consider is as you start to model your processes, what you are actually producing is process as code. And because it's software, it actually has a life cycle. And I just want to call that out for those of you who might maybe have that one foot in IT who would appreciate this. The first part is deploying those models into the runtime and having those actually exist in a development or production environment. They can connect to existing systems and existing user experiences. You're not introducing new tools to the ecosystem, rather you are providing orchestration from the system to those existing tools. So, you know, sending signals into existing EHRs or sending signals into existing scheduling systems. That's the goal. Second to that is the monitoring and administrating those processes to make sure that they're running and healthy. You know, the usual type of IT activity you see for any application deployed in systems. And then last, make sure you set goals, right? What are the measurable outcomes you're hoping to achieve, right? If you have those types of KPIs, you can then, you know, show success as you've improved the process overall. One of the other emerging things you can do is actually run multiple variants of a process and determine which one is actually successful in a form of A/B testing with people, process, and technology. All right, so just to tie this back, you know, we're here to talk about advanced directives and e-consent and advanced care planning. The demo we're going to give right now is of a e-consent model that's being built off of a couple of different BPM models, CMM and DMN. So I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Sverbely for an explanation of that, and he's actually going to walk us through, you know, exactly what we're going to see, and then in addition, he's going to be showing you the actual models themselves that are representational of the runtime. So, John, why don't you take it from here?
Great, thanks, Ben. Today we're going to talk about an example of e-consent related to some type of procedure such as surgery. In the past, e-consent and advanced care planning really were not top priorities in healthcare. They were sort of done after the fact. And as a result, there were issues and failures that arose just because attention was not being paid. Some factors that would arise is that they were collected inappropriately. There might be coercion, there might be conflict of interest. A lot of different factors fed in. Some of them are listed on the right, where a document of which both of these, both e-consent and advanced care directives, are legal documents. And if they're not filled out properly, there are legal consequences to them. And so we'll get into the demo. And Ben, can you switch me over?
Yeah, sure thing.
Thanks.
There you go.
Great. And hopefully you can see that. This is an example of a model for e-consent. And one feature of these models is that they work at multiple layers, the high complexity. The goal is to have it so it's interpretable. And if you have a very complex model, if you put all the details at one level, it becomes overwhelming. So this is the top level for how you might gather consent. Person comes in on the left.
A little bit, it's a little bit difficult to see.
Okay, hang on just a sec.
Thank you.
It's time for people to get their eyes checked.
Yeah, or maybe just full screen your browser, for instance. That might help too.
No, I think it's up now.
Hey Ben, if you turn your video off for just the purpose of this demo, that might give a little more real estate to his screen.
There you go.
Great. Hopefully you can read this now. But anyway, you start off on the left. First, there's a task, which is a placeholder. One of the goals is you want to retrieve any advanced care documents, because sometimes they contain information that is relevant to obtaining consent. Then becomes another task, which is a hidden process, which is to identify the decision maker, and the decision maker is the person who will actually sign the consent, making it a legal document. We go to another task.
Before we move on to the next, let's dive into that process there for identifying the decision maker.
Well, I was hoping to go through the whole. I was going through the whole thing so people got the whole context, and then we could go back and delve into it.
Okay.
The next step is to talk about information, and this is a much larger process. The whole purpose of consent is that it has to be informed consent, and so this is the task around informing the patient and giving them the chance to decide for themselves what they want. Then we go to a combined step, which is the person reaches a decision as to what they want, and there's only 3 decisions: yes, no, or uncertain. And then this is branching. If the person says yes, they sign the document. If no, the procedure is canceled. And if uncertain, you would schedule a new information session. So going back to the decision maker, and again, this is hitting complexity. We have the process where you have to decide who is the decision maker. And this is a decision model. And it basically characterizes the patient, the person who's coming in. And a patient might be a competent adult, say, for example, a lady such as Megan, who's having a knee replacement. She's competent, she's oriented, so the patient would be the decision maker. Other times, a person might have legal guardians in place. The person may be known to be incompetent, and so has a decision maker that's been designated. And in that case, the decision maker should be present, since they'll be the one signing the document. And finally, there's a person who is borderline, might be older, might be on multiple medications, might be questions of decision making, in which case you would have to do a formal competency assessment. If the person is deemed competent, then the patient is the decision maker. If not, then a decision maker needs to be provided to the process. Any comments, Ken? Or Ben?
Yeah, I was just, I wanted to sort of step back for a second and just make sure it's clear for the audience, the overall, actors that are in play here. So what I've heard so far is we have the decision maker as outlined here. And then in addition, we have the patient that's, that this process represents. So you might have, a series of processes as outlined in the previous screen for each patient as they're moving through their care. And then, you might even have a proxy for that patient as outlined here for the decision making. Can we step back up to the procedure consent, John?
Yeah.
So, here on the screen, like the overall, if you had to define the goal of this particular process, what would that be?
Well, it operates on multiple levels. One is to get a legal document that reflects the wishes of the patient. So that's one goal. The second is for the patient to be informed, and an informed patient who can express their decisions as they wish is always a happier patient. One of the problems that can happen in any procedure or healthcare is that adverse things can happen. And one of the claims that often comes is that the patient was never told that there was a risk. If the informed consent is poorly documented or is inadequate, it becomes a debating match as to what really happened. Mm-hmm. So I guess a third goal is that you can provide documentation of what exactly happened and when. Each step is time-stamped. Time spent at each level is done. Every moment the patient spent observing information is provided. So there is documentation. Was the patient informed or wasn't the patient informed? Is there a failure on the part of the physician? Was the physician or the provider actually doing the procedure actively engaged? You can document who the players were. And all that can help decide what was the quality of the whole process and make it better. You can also find people who may be cutting corners, or they may not be in a lawsuit yet, but might be in the future. So you can do remedial interventions.
Can we dive a bit into the consent for procedure, that DMN table there, just to see the how that how those rules are applied?
Well, this one is relatively simple.
Yeah, let's take a look.
And basically, the infeed to this comes out of the previous task, where after the person has gone through training, they have a preliminary decision: are you ready to sign? And so the decision maker gives a response, and the response then leads to a consent, where basically this is a one-to-one mapping, where you ask the person, are you ready to decide?
Can you scroll to the left? The content's running off the screen there.
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Yeah, a little bit more, but that's perfect. Thanks.
This was a pretty trivial example of a decision table where it's a one-to-one mapping between what the response is and what the output is. So this might not be the best example for some of the complexities that can get into it.
Yeah, anything you can do to zoom in on this, John, would be great. I think there's comments from folks who are having trouble reading.
Unfortunately, let's see. Let me
maybe zoom the browser or the TrizoTech zoom function there.
Well, the zoom function only, there's not one in DMN.
Oh, I see. Okay, gotcha.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's great. Much better. Thank you.
Yeah, this one is just used. There's several ways this could have been implemented. This was done by a query then response. So this isn't the best example of how decisions are used, but to make it simple, there's an input and then an output, and that the output drives the branching that occurs.
Okay. John, well, we have about 5 minutes left. Why don't we jump over to the model that we had done with the point of care partners for advanced care planning? I can maybe show that holistic view. And while you jump over there, I just want to make it clear to those who are watching today that all the things that John's showing you, you're seeing an authoring environment, and the value of this is you can change any one of these things. The processes that are running, will continue to act as they had before. When you deploy a new version of the model, you essentially have multiple earlier versions that you can slowly deprecate and actually bring the new processes up to speed. And in that way, you can actually change how you provide care over time and actually rapidly improve the quality of care through automation. So this is not just a way to make sure that things get done or guarantee quality. It's also about continuous improvement and continuous deployment.
Okay, now Ben, you were talking about going to a advanced care planning document. I'm not familiar with the one you're talking about. I have another one that I can bring up.
Okay, yeah, why don't you bring that one up?
Okay.
And Ben, if I may add on, yeah, just real quick, if I may add on, that flexibility actually extends beyond just updates to the business process model itself. You can also introduce evolution through changing those decision rules, through changing other guiding criteria that the process itself is referencing during its runtime. And so you have several different layers that allow for and simplify evolution and increasing the quality of care as you roll forward.
This is Ken Rubin. Could I add one comment?
Please.
Just to connect this presentation with this morning's agenda. So one of the things that I heard this morning from not just one speaker, but several, was that as we look at this advanced care planning landscape, the tooling is an element of the solution, but not the whole solution. And I think where part of the opportunity is, and the reason we wanted to kind of slot this into today, is I think some of what we're seeing now is a potential to bridge some of that last mile. So how do you take a patient's wishes and plans and put them into a position where they can be more active and directly consumable in the care process to cover that last mile? So anyway, I just thought that context would be useful in terms of how to consume some of what we're seeing. Over.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. And I think that brings us up right up against our time.
Okay.
So why don't we concede the presentation to the next group? I think it's going over to Denis.
Very good.
I do want to make a call out to those who are interested in what we're doing here inside of the BPM Plus community. It's a non-for-profit and it's community and volunteer driven. So if any of you have an interest in joining us in what we're doing, please feel free to reach out and we'll get you included and really could use your contributions. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, John.
Thank you, guys. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your last 2 minutes here. Denis, you want to introduce your team and tell us what you're going to display today?
Yeah, I'm just going to make sure that I'm sharing the correct screen. That's always the problem with multiple screen and new tools every time.
You are.
I'm sharing the title screen, title slide.
Yep, looks good, and we can see you in the slide.
Okay, well, we're good to go. Hi, everybody. I'm Denis Gagné from Trisatech. I'm the lead of the ambassador program at the BPM Plus Health community. And what we wanted to do here with the help of John Scribbly is show a quick prototype that we developed in the last week and a half, 2 weeks, really, about how to actually automate the material that was just shown in a more global context. So this is work that we've done in collaboration with the IOI, more particularly on the IOL. So the goal of this quick showcase here is to showcase 3 things. One is the usage of the FHIR consent resource. More specifically, we're going to use a use case that's not the one that was developed for that resource by the PASIO group, but it is, we're using that same resource. We're also going to showcase how we can use these visual process and decision model, the like of what you just seen in the intro, and we're also going to show how we can integrate this in a realistic healthcare ecosystem, in particular the IOL from IOI. And so for the global setup, this is done completely in the clouds. So all of what we're going to do here is completely cloud-based. So from the modeling of the model, as you just seen, to creating the service, and then using the CDS hook to go connect into an EHR mockup that it's itself connected to the IOL. And one of the main points that was presented earlier, and one of the main points we want to push here, is the fact that with this approach, you have a single artifact, which is the model. And that visual model that we just see becomes the guideline specification, it becomes the guideline logic, it becomes the guideline documentation, and becomes the guideline code. So one of the main benefits is that you have a single knowledge artifact to manage the life cycle. So you don't have to have 4 or 5 different artifacts that you have to manage 4 or 5 different life cycle. A single artifact does the complete job for you. And I'm going to pass it to John to talk about the demo scenario we're going to do.
Hi, thanks, Denny. Yeah, today the example we're going to give relates to preoperative care for total knee arthroplasty. And one of the goals for the demonstration is to show that consent exists in context with the other steps that are present. There's both practical and temporal reasons for that. For example, in the case of elective surgery, you can't do consent until you know that you can do the surgery, which usually requires several steps before. You have to establish a diagnosis, then you have to get pre-authorization. Only then would you do the consent. Once you do consent, downstream functions are also affected, because if the person does not give consent, prehabilitation or prep for surgery are not relevant. If they are, then they do become. So it is something which is not by itself, it's part of the whole process. And so to illustrate that, we'll have models in BPMN, DMN, and CMN. So this is the first step in the process that will be illustrated in the example. And this is the process for pre-authorization. And you go through several decisions. One is at the left, there's contraindications for TKA. If there's a contraindication, then the person does not have the surgery. If there is, then you have to determine, does the person meet the criteria for having the procedure based upon severity. If they don't, then they're rejected. And you might do an alternative care. If they do, then you go to a trial of alternative or conservative therapy. If that works, then you do not need to proceed. If it doesn't work, then you're a candidate for going to the next stage in the process of pre-authorization and approval. Further down the line, we've next come to the decision of consent, where, okay, a person's been approved. You check for advanced directives, since that might impact some of the decisions. Then you go through the process of querying the decision maker, and we've discussed that just previously, to decide if they're available and if they are willing to give consent. The person who's been identified then reviews the consent, signs it, and the consent is then entered into the medical record where it is available for surgery. If the person again rejects it or is uncertain, then you would loop back for additional steps. So that takes it back to you, Denny.
Okay, thank you, John. So let me quickly show you. So for example, we have these model. Now these are the diagram that presents the business logic or the logic here that needs to take place. And so what we can do is we can publish these as services. And once you publish it as a service, then you have a service here that will do the TKA consent form. And then I can go and take this service and invoke that service from any kind of environment, an application, a EHR, EMR. So for the showcase purpose here, we have a sandbox for demoing. So imagine this is a mock-up of some kind of a EHR or EMR system that you have. And so we will take the endpoint of that service, and that service does both the chain of the total knee arthroplasty work of deciding whether we should go ahead with the procedure. And if we go ahead with the procedure, then we actually get consent. So if I add this service to my mock-up EHR, EMR here, then automatically, and for those of you that are more astute on the technology side, this is using CDS hook. So I added a CDS hook endpoint for that service. And now you can see that the TKA consent service ran. And in that particular patient here for Michelle Olin, she didn't have any contraindication for the surgery. She didn't meet the criteria, but she had not failed yet the conservative therapy. So the result is to resubmit for an adequate trial after the conservative therapy. So that was one of the paths that John demonstrated. And I can switch from patient to patient, and then this service will run. For example, George here has contraindication for the surgery, so we reject pending the problem resolution. And if I move to Rose here, in the case of Rose, everything lined up and she's approved for the total knee arthroplasty. And then we can move into an aspect. So this portion was completely what we call unattended or straight through processing, was running automatically in the back. And now we step into a step where we need to involve human in the loop. And so then the next point is to query the decision maker. And this is based completely on the consent resource in FHIR from the PASSIO group. So who is the patient ready to consent? Yes. Who's the consent signatory? We'll say the patient in this case. Then we can move forward. Then we can review and sign the consent. So at this point, we would pull a consent document and get it signed by the patient. And then we can pull up that file, add it in here, run it, and then this is completed. So if we go back to our environment now and I go look into the details of rows, I can see that now a new file resource has been added, which is the consent, and the consent is available there, and I can click here and access this consent that was added into the file server in this case. So basically what you've seen here, it goes fast because automation is rapid, but we went through all these steps for each of the patient as we were clicking of figuring out whether they're correct for the approved for the surgery, and if they are approved for surgery, then we would go through these series of steps to the point of getting the consent, uploading the consent into the environment. So this is all done and written into the various elements of the network there, the ecosystem of IOL, writing to the different, so we can write the consent back to the provider system, we can write it back to the payer system, we can write it back to other kind of registry, and national registry or local registry. And while this was all running, as Ben mentioned earlier, we're able to trace all these steps. So every single step that was done, we have all the information that is traced. So with that information being traced, we can actually use that data as feedback on how we're performing against these methods or guidelines that have been defined. Naturally, these process diagram and these different decisions are built based on published best practice and evidence type of material to give us a proper guideline that's accepted globally.
So Denis?
Yes, sir.
This is Ken. If I could just interject one point, forgive me. Just to connect dots, and maybe you could go back to the screen where you were showing the kind of interaction. But for those that are perhaps one step removed from the technologies here, just a couple of things that were in play. So one is you have a workflow that has been expressed using a set of standards. You have a consent resource that has been represented using a different set of standards. You have an API or an interface between a simulated electronic health record and decision support type system that is based upon a standard. And then it showed the interaction of these business processes with different IT systems based on open representations of knowledge to perform a business task. So I'm saying the same thing Denis said in different words, but I think it illustrates kind of the confluence of what we're facing in this advanced care planning environment, where you've got different interacting business processes and policies interacting with a whole host of different IT systems, and the need to represent different data and different processes in ways that can be shared and shareable. So I think that's why this demonstration was really insightful, but I think I fear those that may not have been as close to it might have missed some of the dots. So hopefully I connected a few. Over.
Thank you. And going back to an earlier point that we made about the fact that this single artifact, this model, is not only a representation of the logic, but it is also the code for execution, and it is the documentation. So if I generate from this model here, I'm getting also the actual guideline documentation that is extracted directly from that model. So all that information is right within the model in the different pieces here. So you have all the details that are added into the different elements. Sorry, I'm clicking away, making you dizzy probably. And so you have all the details, the definition of all the steps, and the documentation of it. So a single artifact is really all you need to manage this single knowledge artifact, which reduces a lot of problems with versioning as things, guidelines get improved, as we get more evidence from the automation, getting all this evidence about maybe we're not that efficient or we don't use a few steps that we thought we would be using, then we can go back, redesign, and we have a single artifact to update, and everything now operates in the new way. So hopefully that gives you a glimpse of what's possible using the BPM Plus Health series of standards and connecting this to what's going on in the pass-through project at FHIR, HL7, and also connecting this to ecosystem environment, synthetic environment like the one that IOL is providing graciously from our friends at IOI. And that's it for me. I'll pass it to the next speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, Denis, and thanks everyone for letting me interject a little bit. So what I'd like to do is I'm doing a quasi, I'm playing Ed Daniels for part of the day here, but I'd like to invite Matt Rose to take things from here. So Matt is in a way, he's kind of a perfect bridge because he's involved in some of these communities, but he's also very heavily involved in the advanced care planning community, and in fact reached out to many of the folks that are going to be involved in the lightning round sessions that are coming. So Matt, do you want to bridge us into the rest of the conversation?
Sure, thanks, Ken. Ben, Ken, John, and Denis, thank you for those presentations. So I also want to give a shout out to Janice Reese, who also helped in recruiting a lot of the speakers in the upcoming round. If you know my background, I got into this space through a mixture of events. Like many here, I had an experience around advanced care planning or advanced directives when I was in med school, and I received a call about my father having a coding in the emergency room. They resuscitated him, he was placed in the cold protocol, and they didn't know if he was going to survive the night. Fortunately, he did. But this gave me a lot of insight into some key needs around advanced care planning. Later, I had the opportunity to write one of the 75 white papers, or the first 75 white papers on healthcare interoperability using blockchain technology for the 2016 ONC call. That led to me participating in a hackathon where we built a winning proof of concept, and out of that, our startup company was born. So transitioning from being a physician into technology, into entrepreneurship, there's a lot of key lessons that I learned throughout this startup journey. But one of those key lessons is that technology alone is not the answer. It takes a community to problem solve, or solve problems, I should say. And realizing those solutions really requires that we meet the demands of both regulations and implementation requirements. So I want to take a pause for a second and highlight the word implementation and ask you to think about what that means to you. Does it mean that implementation is based on the technology needs, like we've seen so often in the past? In my opinion, our goal really is to meet the needs of the patient. And therefore, the path forward really requires that we meet the needs of the patient first, the clinician, and then the enterprise. And to do so, it requires an understanding of the business process and viewpoints of multiple stakeholders. So can I go to the next slide? So if you look at this image on the left, this is many providers in the audience will recognize this. This is the Acls algorithm, right? Advanced Cardiac Life Support algorithm. And this really evolved over many years of research and collaboration within the medical community. If you look on the right-hand side of the screen, that is an image from the BPM Plus Health Field Guide. They kind of look similar, right? At least they do to me. And except the BPM Plus image takes you one level out. And as we saw in the previous talks, they really help to understand the relationship of the physical and the machine-related events. And that helps us understand the big picture of how to better implement solutions. And that's why we're all here today. So just to note that at the bottom of this, there should be a link, or at least we'll send out a link later with the field guide if you want to access that in the future. So why did Sava join BPM Plus? We joined because it allowed us to become part of this collaborative community that helps us improve patient care. Our company focuses on patient consent And our mission is to make hard discussions easy through technology. So it was a natural fit. And to circle back into today's lightning round, the previous talks gave you a glimpse on BPM Plus Health. So over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to look at 5-minute presentations by various individuals in the industry about some challenges, projects, and studies experienced by them. These are standards bodies, health information exchanges, vendors, and advocates in this space. So I'd like to tee up our first speaker, Mohan, who will be speaking about the PASSIO project. Thanks.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, Maria.
Okay, great. I wanted to make sure I wasn't double muted. So thank you. I'm delighted to speak to you today about a very timely project that is underway at HL7 with the PASSIO community. And to answer Linnell's question from earlier today, yes, there is a FHIR IG in the works. We are creating the implementation guide for Advanced Directive Information Interoperability with FHIR. I am Maria Mohan, the lead for this project, and the Director of Platform Innovation for AD Vault, the parent company of my Directives. Let me give you an overview of our work. Advanced Directive Information, ADI for short, is the name we gave to that set of information and documents which contain a person's advanced goals, preferences, and priorities for medical care should they become unable to speak for themselves at some point and wish to inform their care with these documented decisions. Because treatment decisions may be made in an urgent situation, immediate access to advanced directive information is essential to its implementation. The Post-Acute Care Interoperability PASSIO project is a collaborative effort between industry, government, and HL7, the world's largest health standards organization, with the goal of establishing a framework for the development of FHIR implementation guides to facilitate health information exchange in support of clinical practice and the management, delivery, and evaluation of health services. Our project's first HL7 FHIR Connectathon was held in January of this year as a subset of a larger effort by the PASSIO community that has been underway for some time now. Our project extended the story of the PASSIO community's persona for this transitions of care use case. Her name is Betsy Smith Johnson, and as she moved through the spectrum of care, we made sure to include the movement of her advanced directive information as well. To focus our attention on what we did during the HL7 Connectathon, specifically related to advanced directive information interoperability with FHIR, I provided a microcosm for us to review together. You'll notice in the blue box called AD Pre. At her 65th birthday in 2015, Betsy created a living will. In her living will, Betsy designated her son as her primary healthcare agent. She uploaded a scanned copy of her living will into the AD Vault registry. Her son consented to serve in this role for his mom. Betsy consented for her information to be retrieved in case of emergency so as to inform care based on her documented goals, preferences, and priorities for care. In the blue box 81, while she was receiving long-term services and supports, LTSS, in her home, her case manager asked if she had any advanced care planning documents. In the blue box 82, Betsy logged on to her mydirectives.com account and shared a copy of her living will with her case manager, who had provided Betsy with a secure endpoint. And upon receipt, the LTSS case manager stored Betsy's living will for reference in their EMR. That's the Alterum group. In the blue box 83, Betsy experienced a health emergency, and upon admission to the hospital, her son and healthcare agent informed the care team that she had a living will stored in the AD Vault registry. The hospital EHR requested a copy of Betsy's living will from the registry. An important aspect of the work that we did for the Connectathon was in demonstrating how to secure the authenticity of the document and its contents. For these advanced medical decisions to be trusted to inform care, it is important that we seal the document that is prepared by the patient or their practitioner with a digital signature, not to be confused with an electronic signature. When AD Vault's registry and repository applied a digital signature to Betsy's document, a hash of the content was computed and preserved within the certificate-based signature. This certificate is associated with an identity-proofed individual. In essence, this puts a digital seal on the document that lets you know if any changes or alterations to the documents are made after the point in time it is digitally signed. An electronic signature, on the other hand, adds a picture of the person's signature to a digital file, and it does not persevere within the document's content at the point it was signed. To those of you who are watching this presentation from a technical and data management perspective, you can appreciate the multiple steps and handoffs of her advanced directive information that took place during the HL7 Connect-a-thon to support this very real story of Betsy moving through transitions of care. And to those of you who provide care and need to access and use the information that is made available to you as you deliver care to your patients, we hope you can appreciate the simplicity of what we did from an end user stance and imagine the difference it made to Betsy, her care team, and the family who experienced her journey secondhand. In future Connect-a-thons, we will involve new technical implementers in Betsy's story and new data sources such as state HIEs. Our first Connect-a-thon was no small victory for Passio and, of course, patients like Betsy. But we are excited to build upon her story and continue the work in creating a FHIR IG for this critical information as we enable it to be interoperable, authentic, and accessible at the point of care. To conclude today, I'd like to leave you with a couple of things. First off, learn how you can get involved with Passio as we continue our work. Please go to www.passioproject.org to learn more. And last, I leave you with these thoughts about the important work of standards development for healthcare from a patient empowerment perspective. Peace of mind means there's no need to wander. Caring means learning what matters to your patients. People want to hold on to what makes them who they are. They want to be treated like a person and not a set of diagnosis codes. Interoperable health information ensures we get the right information for the right person at the right time to the right care team. Thank you for the chance to share what we're doing with Passio.
Fantastic talk. Thank you so much, Maria. And we really love what you're doing over there at the Passio project. So next on the list, and as this is a lightning round, we're going to keep going through quickly. We're moving on to David Pike. Is David Pike available?
I am here.
Perfect, David. We're just pulling up your slide now. And while we're doing that, is Dr. Cooper on the line by chance? Okay. All right. So we have David, you are up, and start whenever you're ready. Thanks.
All right. I normally do this in 45 minutes, so I'm going to do it in 5 just to be difficult. All right. I am the owner of the FHIR Consent Resource. I work for HL7 as co-chair of Community-Based Care and Privacy. I'm also on the Technical Steering Committee. So let's start off. FHIR Consent and Advanced Directives started in about 2015 when we created the FHIR Consent profile on the contract resource. Now, under FHIR, everything has to be represented as a resource. It was thought at the time that doing it as a contract, representing the contract it is between the organization, the healthcare organization, and the patient was the best way to do this. Unfortunately, it was felt that that was just too much information to represent interoperability, so the consent resource was born. It was added to the spec for Standard for Trial Use 3, STU3, and that gave us a very straightforward section with minimal information about who it was acting upon, so the clinician or the organization, as well as the basic requirements and basic exceptions. We moved on, and for R4 we expanded it and changed the structure. It was asked that we take on not only patient privacy consent, but treatment, research, and of course advanced directives in the tune of treatment or intervention-based directives. Obviously, for things like post-most, we would rely on something else that was usually done through CDA documents. If I'm using too many TLAs, let me know, I will stop. Right now, the structure is designed around having a basic concept of, yes, you can do something, or no, you can't, on a global scale. So you set up a basic permit or deny for privacy, for treatment, for research participation, and then have a structure where you have exceptions, and then under that exceptions to those exceptions, and so on until you run out of turtles. This has worked so far. We are, of course, moving forward to R5. We are re-examining this once again to make it better, make it more responsive. We did hand off most of the advanced directives to the PASSIO project and the patient engagement work group, mostly because it is such a large and complex thing to do advanced directives that having it run out of the community-based care and privacy group simply didn't make sense. So within the last year, patient empowerment was created. And of course, we looked at them and goes, they're perfect, you can have it. So as Maria stated, with the PASSIO project, they are moving forward and doing an amazing job getting all of these things together. The biggest issue we've been facing is, of course, FHIR is international. It has to work everywhere around the world. And to do this, we have done our best to keep it as straightforward, as optional, and to make it as robust as needed, but not so complex that you had to sit down and spend 6 months trying to work it out. Right now, we are always looking for people to come in and help us, especially on the international scale, to help us with use cases, help us with ways of finding large holes in it that we need to patch before we make it into something that can't change what HL7 and ANSI says is normative. But we have a year for that, and we haven't broken it too badly yet. Your view is available. Of course, as with all of FHIR, it is public domain. Anybody can go in, anybody can look at it, anybody can give us feedback and suggestions. You can see the link on the screen, build.phir.org/consent HTML is a link directly to the newest and latest and greatest version. That is not the R4 version, which is mandated by the various regulatory agencies, but it is the latest and greatest. We really would look forward to having you come in, participate. If you look in the HL7 website, you can find us at CVCP. We meet Tuesdays at noon. We'd love to have your information. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. However, my time is up. That's my 5 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, David. And really, you know, the initiatives that you're doing at FHIR and HL7, I know it's a large undertaking, and all of you have done such an amazing job over the past few years. So thank you for everything that you're doing, have done, and continue to do. Okay, so the next speaker in our list is Pat Russell. Pat, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Take it away whenever you're ready.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. So you can go on to my slide. Hello, I'm Pat Russell. I'm a nurse and the Director of Policy and Governance for Ehealth Exchange. We are a nationwide nonprofit network of healthcare organizations and 4 federal agencies who have agreed to share detailed patient-specific clinical information. And one of those, of course, is advanced care plans. Today, Ehealth Exchange processes over 280,000 patient query requests for documents. And with that, they retrieve, on average, 1.7 million documents from over 75% of all the hospitals in the US, 5,800 dialysis centers, and 70,000 medical groups. The VA, DOD, SSA, and Indian Health Service as well in the US, who all have access to our exchange looking for information so that they can help their patients. That's what we're all here for. This accounts for over 620 million documents exchanged annually, and we continue to grow at a rate of 10 to 15% each year. Among our partners is Vault, who you've already heard from today, the company behind the My Directives Advanced Care Platform. The CEO, Jeff Zucker, is also here with me if there's any questions related to them. Vault is an example of our dedication to accelerating interoperability by using standards-based methods to share data. Our eHealth Exchange members query My Directives to look for the advanced care plan created and consented to by the individual to be used during a health crisis. Doctors use this information immediately, finding out who speaks for the patient if the patient can't communicate, and to see their most recent expression of their goals of care so medical treatment decisions can be concordant with the patient's wishes. And again, we've heard that over and over today from providers, the need for that. Our work with AD Vault and our other participants helps improve the speed, quality, safety, and the cost of care. And best of all, we can inform these important clinical decisions in a real time when seconds and minutes matter the most. And with that, I just want to say thank you for your time today. And if there's any questions, feel free to reach out to administrator@ehealthexchange.org. And if there's anything related to AD Vault, you can contact info@mydirectives.com. With that, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Pat. So, eHealth Exchange has done an amazing job, and we really do appreciate all that you're doing to connect the hospital systems and the agencies and the medical groups and really making a difference in exchanging information to make patient care better. Next on the list is Mike Muniz, who will follow up and really give more of a talk about AD Vault, and it was great to hear their interaction, or at least their interaction with eHealth Exchange. So Mike, I'll hand it off to you.
Great, thank you, Matt. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep,
yes.
We can hear you.
Perfect, just wanted to make sure since I was on mute before. Okay, so if we could jump to the first screen, that would be great. So really from an AD Vault perspective, our company was originally founded to ensure that consumers have the ability to express their goals and preferences of care. And where the rubber really hits the road from a My Directive standpoint, which allows consumers to create an account, create a digital advanced care plan, and or upload any existing documents that they may have. But the two areas where we really address consent are in the creation or assignment of a healthcare agent and also document sharing privileges. So as we go through the various, and it looks like my screens might be messed up here. Can you advance or go back? There were some transitions in here to bring up the individual screens. Looks like those might be gone.
I think that may be your only slide right there, so you'll have to go with that, I think.
Okay, well, I'll talk through the slides, but really we start out from a healthcare agent assignment perspective, and when a consumer is naming a healthcare agent, part of the process, of course, is setting aside some time to have a discussion with that individual to make sure they're willing to accept those privileges. But in the application itself, we make sure that we give them the ability to control when the notification is sent to a healthcare agent, asking them for the ability to accept those privileges. We generate a custom, or have the ability to generate a custom message to that individual, to their email account, so that they can review the request and then actually come back to our site and accept the privileges that are being granted by the consumer that set up the account in the system. So that's really stage number one. The second is in our document sharing privileges. So any documents that are created in the My Directives platform, whether it's through the creation of an electronic advanced care plan or whether it's via document upload, don't automatically get shared with healthcare agents and or any contacts that get stored in the system. Those privileges have to be granted separately. So once you set up a healthcare agent or once you upload a contact into the system, individually you can go in and assign various rights and privileges to each of those individuals for various levels of access to your documents. So in some cases, you may want to give a user the ability to view a document but not share, which would prohibit them from downloading and printing the documents. Or you may just want to let them know that you've got documents that exist in the MyDirectives system and are accessible via the 80 Vault Exchange. So again, we allow the consumer to control rights that they give to healthcare agents and any access to documents stored in the system. And all of those privileges really boil down to the information that we deliver in those documents whenever they are presented to a clinician at the point of care or any other user that has access through our systems, like those that were mentioned through the Ehealth Exchange connections that we've got and other EHR integration points. So the consumer always has complete control over who speaks for them and who has access to their documentation. And from a consumer standpoint, that really covers the capabilities that we provide there. Of course, we have other clinician and physician-facing tools, which really are expanding the ability for clinicians and facilitators and social workers to have those discussions at the point of care. But from a consumer perspective, that's what we do today in the MyDirectives platform, and those features and functions have been live and in practice for many, many years. And that wraps up my component or my portion of the session.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. And again, every one of these presentations, I'm starting to sound like a broken record. It's so exciting to see the collective mindsets and the initiatives to really make a difference around this subject matter. So next up is Dr. Marin Cooper at Touchstone Life Care. Dr. Cooper, are you there? We'll give it a second as we try and get her.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
I'm unmuted.
Yep.
Good morning, all.
Well,
thank you very much for having me on. Hi there, Matt. Nice to speak with you again. I just have the one slide, and I thought this morning I would bring in a slightly different something, and that's to speak with you about the situation here in Australia. We have a slightly different situation. Ours is very much a publicly funded healthcare system, and therefore anything that we put in place to prevent the wasted resources in those last couple of hours, weeks, days of month are directly connected to taxpayers' money, and our government now is actually itemizing and putting numbers on the amount saved. So December 2020, we had KPMG, one of our big four accounting firms, do this work for the government. So we are certainly getting some systems in place nationally to encourage advanced care planning, which is very good to see. But where I wanted to take this conversation now is something I haven't heard spoken about yet this morning. That is the area of capacity. So we are doing some major work here in Australia now about documenting capacity to make healthcare decisions, which, as you know, is very different to a blanket concept of capacity. You may not be able to make decisions about your finances and your mortgages, but you may be able to make decisions about your healthcare. And here in Australia, we're trying to use supported decision-making from a rights-based perspective, so that people with early dementia or reduced capacity still have the right to be involved in decision-making about their own care, particularly end-of-life care. And we need to come up with ways to assist them to make those decisions and to document those decisions, share those decisions, and have their assessment of their capacity piggybacked on those decisions. Using things like multimedia, visual approaches, one-on-one facilitated decision-making sessions, those sorts of things. The beauty about digital advanced care planning is those supported decision-makings can be evidenced, and that person's advanced care plan is more legal at law. In Australia, we have two types of law, as you do. We have statutory law and we have common law. Our statutory laws around advanced care planning are obtuse and dense and form a obstacle block to people doing advanced care plans, but the common law approach in which advanced care plans have to be considered, not followed to the letter, but considered and therefore nuanced, which is helpful. The common law approach to advanced care planning is far more flexible, practical, scalable in Australia. And we are working now with neuropsychologists, financial advisors, and people who are experienced in capacity assessment to try to extend the reach of advanced care planning to those people with reduced capacity. It's a shame that there is, Australian dollars right there in the middle of that slide. That's not what we are about, but of course, that is one of the driving forces from federal government level behind this work. And I think that's my 5 minutes.
Dr. Cooper, thank you so much, and thank you for taking the time. I know it's early in the morning there in Australia to come on. And this is really, it's fantastic to shed a different light on advanced care planning. That it really is not just a US issue, right? This is a world problem. It's a world issue that we're all trying to resolve and figure out solutions for. So thank you for shedding light on that and sharing what you're doing there in Australia. So next on the list is Kate DiBartolo from the Conversation Project. Kate, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Take it away, Kate.
Great. Hi, everyone. This is Kate DiBartolo calling in from a beautiful day in Washington, D.C. It's nice to be with you. I'll say, as we've heard today, expanding consent and this interoperability issue is really important, and there are some exciting products and pathways for that. But for the patient or the person at the center of these decisions, understanding what our values and wishes are and being able to talk about them needs to be the first step. So it doesn't do us much good to have someone's wishes known in a chart, but not amongst family members, or to have someone be focused on what's the matter with me instead of what matters to me. So the Conversation Project, a public engagement initiative within the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, or IHI, works to help people share their wishes for care through the end of life. We offer free conversation guides like what you see here, as well as tools for community leaders to bring advanced care planning to their regions. We know that local leaders can help translate this often better than any national program could. We have guides for how to choose a healthcare proxy or how to be a proxy, how to talk to a healthcare team. We've got guides for those of caregivers of folks with Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia, or for parents of seriously ill children. We've also worked with Ariadne Labs to create a workbook for patients with serious illness, as well as a COVID guide. So for us, we think that there's no right or wrong answer for the type of care someone might want, but we're really striving to elicit someone's values by providing open-ended questions, examples, scale questions like, on a scale of 1 to 5, are you more concerned about receiving too much care or too little care? And then helping users figure out how to talk about those values with people who matter most to them. Things have generally been going really well with our tools since 2012, but we've been hearing some feedback now and then about why our tools wouldn't work with X audience or weren't being used by Y providers, and wanted to ensure that the tools we produce are inclusive and accessible to everyone. So over the last year now, with support from the Cambia Health Foundation, we set out to update our conversation starter tools to be sure that they're appropriate and approachable for larger, more diverse audiences than what we'd been originally reaching. We worked with dozens of content and context experts around the country and internationally to be sure that the tools felt representative of all demographics, particularly more marginalized audiences. So in our guides now, we provide wider examples of who matters most or who to engage, such as an aunt, uncle, family, friend, faith or spiritual advisor. This was really important both to solo agers, which is an important demographic that we've been working with more, and the LGBTQ+ community, as family of origin isn't always best or available. Similarly, we removed a lot of language about loved ones in favor of those who matter most. In the examples we provide, we added much more inclusive stories to reflect wider audiences, gender neutral language throughout, and enhanced general diversity of photos and added illustrations, which both breaks up the text and allows people to really see themselves in the stories more. We are still building out our library of illustrations and have made sure to include a variety of ages, races, body types, relationship dynamics, formality, assistive devices. To many folks who are familiar with conversation project things, you might not notice a lot of the changes. The guides look kind of the same, but we incorporated hundreds of pieces of feedback on content, flow, and format over the last year that we think will really make a big difference in how these tools are used and what audiences they help engage and reach. So we're excited. They're just live on our site now in English, Spanish, and Chinese. There's a couple little tweaks that we're finishing, but these have a Creative Commons license on them. And we would be really excited to work with any of you to encourage more conversations. You can find more information on the conversationproject.org. And thanks for having us be a part of this.
Thank you, Kate. It's really wonderful to see the breadth of everyone working from different backgrounds and all that you've done at the Conversation Project to really help patients have a conversation around these hard subjects. So we are moving on to the next speaker, and that is Dr. Joe Barmakian. Dr. Barmakian, are you on the call?
I am here.
Perfect. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Matt, and good afternoon. I'm a semi-retired orthopedic surgeon, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today. The U.S. Advanced Care Plan Registry, or USACPR, electronically stores documents, including advanced directives, DNRs, POLST, MOLST, organ donor information, and healthcare proxies, and makes them available to healthcare providers whenever and wherever they're needed. Now, you may be wondering why an orthopedic surgeon is talking to you about advanced care planning. Well, in the 1990s, as a young orthopedic surgeon, I sometimes had elderly patients with hip fractures who ended up in the ICU. I would listen to the ICU doctor talk to families about treatment decisions and ask about a living will. The family members would say, "We think mom has a living will, but we don't know where it is." And sometimes family members were reluctant to make treatment decisions, usually ending up saying, "Do everything you can to save her, doctor." I thought, there must be a better way to store these documents so they would actually be available when needed. And I found that while federal law guaranteed everyone the right to make choices and record them in an advanced directive, there were 50 different state laws, and there was no central location or organization where the documents could be stored and retrieved. So in 1996, I started the U.S. Living Will Registry, a database of electronically stored documents that were retrievable through an automated telephone faxback system. As use of the internet grew, we switched over to being a web-based service, and as advanced care planning evolved and the living will document itself became obsolete, we evolved too, expanding our services and updating our name to the U.S. Advanced Care Plan Registry. We service state registries, health information exchanges, hospitals and health systems, community organizations, estate planning attorneys, and even individual consumers. We use our existing time-tested proprietary software framework to set up new registries. The system is flexible and allows the incorporation of whatever specific requirements they may have, so there is no need for organizations to reinvent the wheel by starting from scratch. States and healthcare organizations can create their own registries using our systems in the background, with the added advantage that their people are also part of a national registry. We can integrate with any electronic medical record, and the document can be accessed through the EMR, but we don't think the EMR is necessarily the best place to actually store the document. Storing documents outside the EMR in our secure HIPAA and high-tech compliant data center allows access to many different types of healthcare providers in different locations and under various circumstances. And the registrants themselves have access to the document and can update it so that it reflects their current wishes. We remind them annually to review their document. We have mobile applications that allow the registrant to access their document, to view, fax, or email it. And we even have an app that allows emergency personnel to search for a document by address. The point is that these documents need to be available when needed. We are concerned that the Cures Act may inappropriately lump these documents with protected health information, unnecessarily complicating the process and impeding access to these important documents. Over the past 25 years, we have also found that people don't feel comfortable giving this document to their health insurance company or to the government for fear that it might be used against them. So they like the idea of storing it with a disinterested third party like us. In the end, everyone benefits. The patient gets their wishes followed, the family is relieved of burdensome, guilt-ridden decisions, the treating doctor is given direction for treatment, and the hospital saves valuable resources. While society as a whole benefits, the payer benefits as well. And this is an area we've been working on. We have a hard time getting in to speak to insurance industry about our service, even though it would ultimately benefit them. We embrace e-consent, but encourage and emphasize the conversation. We don't think a checkoff form with an e-signature is the best way to create a document. We look forward to using e-consent to facilitate the conversation and then to memorialize the conversation in a document that can be stored securely, quickly, and easily accessed. We have been quietly working on these issues discussed today for the past 25 years, and have already overcome many of the barriers discussed today. We don't advertise, so you may not have heard of us, but our solution is working right now, today, across the country, providing secure access to patients' choices. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Dr. Barmakian. So we are on to the next speaker, and I know we're nearing the hour, running a little bit over time, and this is great though. All the speakers have been fantastic, so thank you so much for staying with us and staying focused with this lightning round event. So next up is Michael Kirsten. Michael, are you on the line?
Hello.
Perfect. Welcome, Michael. Take it away.
Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. I'm going to speak about a case study analysis we did not too long ago, and it's really the impact on hospice utilization in place of death in the last 30 days of life. Vinca, just as a real quick recap, integrates advanced care planning portal and documentation capabilities into EHRs like Epic and Cerner. It's also a patient engagement platform as well. I'm going to speak specifically to our work in Oregon, where we have a large presence. We have 3 large health system partners, and also these forms flow seamlessly back and forth between those health systems, Vinca and the Oregon State Registry for POLST. So there are a couple of states that at least I know about that do make relatively recent decedent data available to people who are interested in doing work that's going to benefit process improvement and end-of-life care, Oregon and California. So we applied for and received 1 year of 2018 decedent data from the state of Oregon. We went through and matched those patients to the patient information we have in Vinca for all of the ADT data we get for all the patients that are involved or part of those 3 health systems. We found 3,029 decedents that were 65 and older. About half of them had a POLST in Vinca, and as you can see, a little less than half did not have a POLST. The decedent data, basically the death certificate data that's in an Excel, single sheet, also tells you, is the death natural, is it accidental, et cetera, et cetera. So we only looked at natural deaths, patients affiliated with a health system per the ADT feed, and whether the POLSTs that were created by the health system or uploaded directly to the Oregon POLST registry. We know that as well, and included these patients that were part of this denominator. So once the match was complete, we were then able to look at patients that had a POLST or did not have a POLST, and I want to share with you the results. Can we skip ahead and bring up the slide has an animation piece, so if you skip forward, it should call up the first level of data. If that's not possible to do, I might have to just speak to
Mike,
it.
are you able to do
Yeah.
that?
There
Okay.
isn't an advance on it. There's just that single set slide deck.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's unfortunate. Would have sent a full
The
stop.
challenge to the speaker. Sorry.
No problem. So first thing we'd look at was impact on place of death, scanned versus digitally created polls. This is interesting. The digital workflow solves a number of problems around validity of forms, and also creates like a certain cadence in the conversation that maybe this is evidence of a higher quality conversation. Could also be that there's
there you go.
More palliative care involvement. Were you able to do it? Great. So what we saw was 13% increase in home deaths as opposed to in hospital. 62% increase in hospice facility deaths. There's a large inpatient hospice facility in this region. And 29% lower hospital deaths. So really, I think we talk a lot about in end-of-life care, patient preferences for dying at home. Really wonderful to see that Pulse had that kind of impact for patients. Okay, one more. And then impact on place of death, pulse versus no pulse. So this really highlights the difference. Patients with a pulse had a 75% lower in-hospital deaths, and also 53% higher hospice facility deaths. So very, very stark differences in place of death, which is an important quality indicator as well. We need to do further research and show the level of care concordance in this group. Not everyone wants a place of death at home, but most people do from all the surveys that we have seen over the years. And so it kind of mirrors that kind of percentage that we see in the surveys. And then one last row of results there, which is, thank you, impact on hospital utilization last 30 days of life, with pulse versus without. So with a pulse, 31% less bed days, 25% less hospital admissions, 25% less ED visits. And you can do a back of the envelope calculation based off of what are known national costs for these events. And it comes to a $3,000 per person savings. We all know, we're not here to talk about focus on cost savings. It's really about quality care. But as the previous speaker mentioned, that there often are financial pressures that lead us to invest more in palliative care and advanced care planning. So sometimes an important metric to show there as well. I think one last thing to say is pulse is a big part of it, but also it's what happens with that pulse conversation. We can say with some confidence that a lot of these patients, because of the conversations that took place, got into palliative care programs and hospice. All these contributed to these kind of results. So that's our presentation on the case study. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. This is really enlightening to see the different variations in a lot of the research and some of the study results of the impact of what some of the vendors have been able to do, and in your case with Vinca, the impact that you've done with some of these real hard figures behind it. So moving on to our next speaker is Jerry Goodno and Lorraine Constable. Are you both on the line?
I'm here.
Yes, I am. I'm going to let Jerry go, though.
Perfect. I'll let you take it away.
All right. I think we should have a slide. Yes.
Yes, we should.
Cool. Sure. So in concert, actually, with an ONC LEAP grant and San Diego Health Connect, we've been modeling e-consent at the service level, all the way, including the 4 basic domains, including advanced directives, privacy, and the like. And we've taken that work now up to the service-oriented architecture group up at HL7 to generalize that work across many different domains. Our goal there is principally looking at automated consent decision support. So whether or not a consent decision can be made on a particular basis and what key services are involved in that. We've been working with an international group of participants. So we have a broad range of particular use cases and requirements about how consent may well function in different jurisdictions and how it changes over time, especially when we're trying to look at evaluating in an automated fashion. We started to tackle only really 3 of many of the different services possible in terms of consent management as a whole, starting really with consent discovery, which is discovering where and what consent records exist out in a broader community that will affect a particular consent decision, the consent decision service itself that evaluates those sets of records, and then finally a consent enforcement service, which allows that consent to be applied, which includes both, permit, deny, as well as any obligations or burdens that the participants may well have as a result of that. That orchestration service itself is actually working right now it's working around a variety of different types of standardized artifacts to apply the consent on. Examples would include, for example, privacy concerns on even V2 messages from HL7 or modern FHIR documents or CDA documents and the like. We're handling it sort of in a content neutral fashion, but we're basing all this work on the HL7 consent resource as the core and have abstracted that out into a abstract model that we're working off of. Currently, we've balloted standard for trial use in January, and we're going through the ballot reconciliation process on that. And we, of course, encourage comments in that trial use standard as it goes forward. And we expect probably to expand it into more domains and services. We there at the bottom have a nice little link to where our project is, so you're welcome to come get involved in that if you have any interest. And I think that covers the main things in our diminishing time, unless Lorraine, you had anything you want to add.
Just the fast comment that we meet at 7 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays, and everyone's welcome to participate.
Thank you all very much.
Perfect. So that's a nice conclusion to our 5-minute sessions.